Hey everybody, welcome back into the Atlanta Born and Brand studio. It's been a while since we've been here, but our new season, our first guest in studio this year is Blake Canterbury from Purposity. Welcome, Blake. Thanks so much for hanging out with us today.
Yeah, excited to actually be in person too.
Yes. It's been an awful lot of Zoom interviews over the last 18 months, so it's good to have somebody by my side to talk a little business. And Blake, I would love, the first question I love to ask people, typically is if you bump into somebody on the street and they ask you, you're getting to know them and they say, Blake, what do you do? What's your answer to them?
So I typically say I run a nonprofit tech startup. And that just leads to a million questions because that is nobody does that, right? So
yeah,
people
there
are
are conflicting words in that sentence, right?
They totally are because
Yes.
everybody's intrigued by a tech startup. When you throw nonprofit, they're like, wait, how does that work? What
Yeah.
is that? And it's like, well, we use technology to help people. And
Yeah.
then it's like, okay, that's kind of intriguing. And then it just kind of rolls from there.
So if they ask the same question about Purposity, they say, okay, well, what is Purposity? What's the answer there?
Yeah, a lot of times I just say it's the easiest way to help your neighbor. So basically we have an app you download. You can scroll through and see the real-time needs of people around you. Like a kid needs a pair of shoes, a family needs dinner tonight. You buy it, it's on their doorstep in 24 hours, and you get a notification in real time letting you know the pair of shoes or the dinner you purchased was delivered. And it kind of brings transparency to both sides of it. And really, the key was as we think about our world, our generation, we just felt like most people in the world want to do good. Most people just don't know where to start.
Sure.
And as we drill down on that, generosity for the most part, most people feel like it's reduced to either you text $10 to a disaster, or maybe you volunteer somewhere you may or may not care about, which hasn't been an option for the past year and a half. Right. And we just thought, why are we doing generosity the same way our great-great-grandparents did it? Let's leverage technology to actually make it fun and cool and bring it into, what our generation could actually use.
Sure. And one of our missions here with Atlanta Born and Brand is let's use technology, the internet, social media, all of those things that sort of inherently connect us digitally to introduce people to interactions that they can have with people in their community in person. And you guys are doing that in a big way to say, all right, let's take this medium that is inherently disconnected from people face to face and use it to have real, face to face type of impact in people's lives, which is cool.
Yeah, and that's it. A lot of times technology gets a bad rap, and a lot of times rightfully so, right?
Sure,
and it's this love-hate, I think, with technology, because we all know the power that it harnesses, and we all know the negative side of it.
Right.
And so from a fundamental standpoint, it was, how do we build redemptive technology? How do we actually enhance relationships, foster meaningful connections and community versus divide each other? And we just felt like the world needs it right now more than ever, maybe.
Yeah, without a doubt. That's good, Blake. And talk to me about the idea stage of this. How was this birthed? Where were you sort of in your life when this thing started coming to a head?
Yeah, so I'll give you, because we have a little bit of time. So the longer kind of backstory here.
Love the long story.
So my journey kind of in this space in general started when the earthquake hit in Haiti back in 2009. So I got called by a disaster relief organization to run social media inside the earthquake. And we launched a campaign, connected United Nations, Doctors Without Borders, Samaritan's Purse, aided about 100,000 people in 2 weeks down there. And that was just kind of a pivotal moment in my life. And since then, kind of the last 10 years have been dedicated to leveraging tech for good in some capacity. But where Purposity came into play, I kind of spent 5 years speaking and consulting, doing social movements. And then I went on with a creative agency in Atlanta, working on mobile apps and TV ads. And then one day, a homeless liaison at a school district, and I didn't even know what a homeless liaison was at the time.
Yeah.
She sent me an email and said, Blake, kids are walking into classrooms with holes in their shoes and they're going home hungry. Can technology help with this? And so I called some friends. We moonlighted on nights and weekends and built just a basic technology, gave it to the school district, and walked away. And 3 months later, they called and said, you fundamentally solved this issue for us. Every school district in the country is facing this. Almost every nonprofit's facing this at some level.
Wow.
And we didn't think we solved it, but we knew we found a felt need in the world. And where the light bulbs really went off for us was once we started conducting just massive user research. And it was kind of what we just referenced. Everybody we interviewed, it didn't matter age, race, religion, who they were. Everybody had something innate that wanted to help other people. And once we realized that people said, I want to do good, but my best options are texting $10 and not knowing who I'm helping.
Right.
And we're seeing the long-term effects of even Haiti. 10 years later, $600 million went there, and people are saying, it's not any better. Did my money actually help? Like, what did we actually do? And we just really thought, okay, let's leverage technology to build a lifestyle brand. And so fundamentally, we thought it should be easy, it should be fun, and it should be more transparent. And if we could bring those elements into this, then we can marry tech that would be location-based, like an Uber or Lyft. We could add fun social components, whatever's cool at the time, whether it's TikTok or Instagram. And then finally, let's build a lifestyle brand that people actually want to wear the t-shirts of, they actually want to be associated with. And if we did that, we might could build generosity for our generation.
Yeah, and I love that you on the clothing, on the t-shirts. One of my favorite t-shirts that I own now is one of you guys' shirts. That's just a solid black shirt with a small logo right here that says "Live on Purpose." Right? And so, sometimes millennials get a bad rap for, we are a very purpose-driven generation, and that can lead to sort of bouncing around from thing to thing. But it seems like what you've done, I'm assuming we're of similar age. Don't know that to be a fact, but what you've done is sort of taken that drive into folks and said, all right, here's an outlet for this in a really constructive way.
Yeah, totally. And thanks for having the shirt.
Absolutely.
It's literally part of my uniform. This is probably the only day of the week I'm not wearing it this week. But yeah, I mean, that was kind of the mantra, and thinking even our name is kind of purposeful, if you will, right? So we married purpose and generosity and called it Purposity. And part of this was, how do you get people into generosity, right? And part of our thinking was, we're not here to build a platform for the people who already give.
Sure.
How do we attract people who just don't care about philanthropy? It feels like stereotypes and cultural elites. And, it's like, if we can figure out a way to engage millions of people who don't give, the people who do give would probably follow. But our thought was, every human at some point in their life asked the question, what is my purpose? And then generosity for most people is typically put off till later in life, right? You get, your job, you establish yourself, and then you have some income at the end of life, or like as you're coming into age, and you're thinking, okay, now what do I do with it? And our thought is, wow, like purpose to me, and I could go down a whole rabbit trail on purpose alone, but to me, I believe it's the ultimate precursor to life, to happiness, to understanding where you are. And part of it is like, we do personality tests, we do strengths finders, and all these things are good. Yeah. But if you don't know what your purpose is and how to leverage it, then all these things are good things. But if you can have a purpose and then you leverage them on top of it, then the rest of your life, it's going to be meaningful. And you're not going to have a season of life. You're like, man, you know what? I wish I could have redone my 20s here. Or, man, what advice would you give me? You could have done it kind of all along. Yeah. And generosity, we believe, is the foundation. Like, we believe purpose is actually rooted in generosity. That most of us are trying to buy our way to happiness. And when you actually begin to give your life away, when you actually begin to do things for other people, you actually find it. And culture and media and all sell us the buy your way to happiness. And I tell you, there's books and, go beyond me, but there are people literally on their deathbed, and the stories they tell of their happiest moments in life, 100% of the time are things that they did for other people, or things that somebody selflessly did for them. And it was never the car they bought or the clothes they bought. Other than that Live on Purpose t-shirt.
That's right. That was the best $25 that you could spend right there. But no, it's a great way to filter, life decisions, through this purpose that you come up with. We released something at the beginning of 2020 on social media that was just a simple question of, how can you make your city better in 2020? And if that's your purpose for the year. And if you have that, something, a purpose that is longer than just a year, maybe it's for a lifetime, all of a sudden these small decisions that you make can get filtered through that. And it's sort of an eye-opening experience for you, because you're like, all right, that decision that I made to go and lease that car that maybe I couldn't quite afford, like, okay, let's take that extra $200 a month and put it towards something that is going to be filtered through, this purpose that we've set up in a positive way.
Yeah. And look, I love that question. Like, how could I do good for my city? A whole vision of what would a city look like if people just simply help their neighbor.
Sure.
Right? Like, I mean, we all get you turn on the news, you get overwhelmed. You're like, I hear an inspirational TED talk, and you're like, oh, let's go change the world. And you look around you and you see, 10 homeless folks, and you see, the children's hospital needing this, and you're like, wow, I get overwhelmed. And when you get overwhelmed, you do nothing, and doing nothing gets us nowhere. Right. Yeah. And so how do you have a series of simple action steps, that can lead us towards a city getting better?
Yeah. It seems like the idea was solid. You felt good about the concept. Going from idea to execution is always the hardest part, right? So tell me about the early days. How did you start to take this concept, this idea, this purpose, and turn it into, an organization, a nonprofit, a technology platform that you felt like could be successful?
Yeah, so our thinking was, let's get better before we get bigger. And that is not the tech world's typical approach. It is how fast and how big can you go, right, and how do you get the biggest evaluation.
How many people can we ask for money?
Yeah,
that's right.
And so we started literally with one school district. And we were like, let's run this for a year and learn everything we can. And by the end of the year, we were running 5 school districts.
Wow.
By the end of year 2, we were running about 30 or 40 school districts and nonprofits. We started peppering nonprofits in there. But then word of mouth just started happening. And I think we crossed, 25, 30, 40,000 users. And we were still in like a private beta at this time, like still learning what we could. So November 2018, one of the interesting things is like we just constantly listened to users. And we were set up in primarily Atlanta, Chattanooga, and Denver, Colorado, to test different markets. What can we learn? What does it look like? And each of those cities had different reasons that we chose them. And what happened was, if you signed up for Purposity and we weren't in your city, we put you on a holding list, and we said, hey, we'll let you know when we come to your city.
Yeah.
Well, we received about 500 emails from users saying, hey, look, if a kid needs a pair of shoes, I don't care if they're in Chattanooga or Idaho, let me in.
Yeah.
And that was just a moment for us of saying, okay, location is a beautiful proximity, but what we really found was Purposity was a community of people proving humanity is good. And people didn't care that technology brought a sense of community that was broader. It was more of like identifying with this community of doing good than it was even just your physical. And
Sure.
we were dedicated to saying, hey, we're going to come to your physical location, but let's start building this community. So November of 2018, we released our first public mobile app. And at that point, it would pull your location and you could see needs nearby you. And if we weren't nearby you, you'd just see ones random from around the country. And it turned out that was a lot of fun. So the scaling side of it was really that. And then we just allow school districts and nonprofits wherever they are to sign up, and then they start promoting. And so we can either look at, so Las Vegas, New York, and California actually have 3 of our largest user bases, and we don't even have needs there yet.
Wow.
So we now are coming behind California and New York and saying, hey, look, we've got thousands of people that want to meet your needs. Do you guys want to sign up for free? And that's an easy
Sure.
conversation. So we can go either way as far as this goes. But kind of 3 years out, we now have live needs in 27 states. We're rolling out national partnerships with Make-A-Wish Foundation, Boys and Girls Club of America, to try to get coverage into all 50.
Yeah.
And now we're just kind of running, and I missed one kind of major point was we were getting better before we get bigger. And then COVID hit, right? And the magical pivot, and there was a lot for us inside of COVID to learn from. But our board called a meeting, and they said, look, you've been telling us that this was the future of generosity. And overnight, people can't volunteer physically anymore.
Yeah.
Everybody in the world is now stuck in their home. And if there's ever time you're
Staring
saying,
at their
how do I
phone.
help my neighbor?
Yeah.
this is the only means possible. And they said, you had it. And the only issue is we aren't funded enough to scale up and serve every need in the country right now. So that was a moment where we said, okay, it's time. We're not going to be perfect, but it's time to start growing and scaling.
Yeah.
And so that was a big learning, I think, for us in that. So we said yes to the Today Show for the first time. So we'd done no marketing to this point. And we said yes to the Today Show. I think we saw 40,000 signups from a 2-minute clip in, an hour. And so we looked at this and said, wow, if we only do a PR tour, like I think we could populate this thing. So that was a big kind of moment for us. And in the past year and a half, I've had about 100,000 people sign up. And we're now kind of heading up and to the right, if you will.
Yeah, no. And I mean, the board was right, like what is a better microcosm of sort of the future of generosity and people making an impact, right from their phone than a situation where you're locked in your house and, like you said, you can't volunteer and the only option you have is the phone. So, I mean, I'm sure, are you thinking as COVID is sort of ramping up, like, you hear people talk about, like, if they're going on Shark Tank, you have to have your website ready and you've got to have, like, the infrastructure ready for that bump. Are you starting to almost panic in a way, thinking, okay, like, we have the answer to so many questions that are being asked right now. How do we, sort of turbocharge this?
Yeah, 100%. And I'm a dreamer. I'm like kind of the ultimate visionary. And so I've got a roadmap of where we want to take this thing.
Yeah.
So I'm looking at it saying, well, everybody's saying, wow, this is an incredible tool. And I'm thinking, well, X, Y, and Z is not even in here yet. You're not even seeing where this thing's actually going to go. But yeah, there's a million questions. And I think in the tech world, not the nonprofit world, the nonprofit world has to have everything buttoned up. So we had to do a lot of legwork on the nonprofit side of, like, how do we, philosophically make sure that we're not enabling somebody in a bad situation and make sure we're moving them from poverty to sustainability? How do we make sure, we're transparent and show you the end result of who you help?
Sure.
So we had all of these big questions, and then the philosophical questions of, do we have friends on the platform? And what does that look like to have friends? And then is it, philosophically good to be able to see your giving stats or not? And so all of these deep questions that we were wrestling with and have been wrestling with, and now we feel like we're ready to go on the other side. So yeah, long answer to say we had a million questions beyond just, hey, is our tech ready for this moment? And we don't know how many signups we would have gotten from today's show. Our site did crash. And so we weren't fully ready for it. And that was, it was good and bad at the same. You're like, oh, so many people hit it, we crashed. But at the same time, you're like, we don't know how many people missed out. So big lessons, building more. But now we feel really good about where we are. That's and great. Excited about to head down a pathway of even more features and make this thing more engaging.
Blake, talk to me about the city of Atlanta. And, so many people start business, just for the reason of proximity. It's where they are. Okay, I'll start it right here. What has it been like for you to grow this thing in this city, and how has the reception from the community here in Atlanta, what's that reception for you guys been?
Yeah, it's cool. And I think we kind of we're handed where to start when the the homeless liaison sent us the email. But at the same time as our backyard, Atlanta, a couple major pieces happened. One, Georgia Power jumped in as a corporate sponsor and said, hey, look, we want to fund your scalability across the state. So now almost every school district in the state is on board. We got a handful that aren't yet. And then in Atlanta, in the metro Atlanta area, we've got almost one of every type of nonprofit that exists, from foster care to sex trafficking to homelessness to Children's Healthcare of Atlanta. Literally any type of cause now in Atlanta is on the platform. So whatever you care about, you can find it and you can engage and help your neighbor, which is really fun. And so Atlanta's kind of leading the way on that side. But at the same time, we've done no marketing. So honestly, I'm kind of excited about this podcast because I don't think a lot of folks in Atlanta even know we exist yet. And so we've got one side where how do we create a movement of people? And I think Atlanta's the place to prove this, to say, wow, if there's anywhere that says, hey, look, we're willing to help our neighbor if we knew they were in need, I can't imagine Atlanta isn't the place to prove that. So as I look at, 6 million people in metro Atlanta, we probably have, 40,000 people signed up in the city of Atlanta. So I'm like, how do we cross that first million mark, first 500,000 mark? And so I'm expecting from this podcast us to break the first 100,000.
Hey,
right?
There you go. There you go.
No, but seriously, it's how do we just enable people to say this exists? Would you help your neighbor? Sign up and tell a neighbor. And if we could do that, there's no ask, there's no guilt with the way we built this. It's just simply, man, if you find something meaningful, would you spend $15 and buy this kid a pair of underwear that needs it? It's super low hanging. So we're proud. We want Atlanta to lead the way forever, and it is right now. And I hope we can go deeper.
Absolutely, man. Well, and you talked about you've got needs in 27 states now, working towards 50. That's obviously a big goal, and will be a huge celebration point when you get there. But what else? You talked about, as a visionary, knowing in the back of your head where you want to go as an organization, and having those ideas and those steps that other people can't see yet, and the excitement that just sort of festers because of that. What is coming up for you? What do you see, 5 years down the road as really the direction you think this can go?
Yeah, so two parts to that, and one is the tech, and then one's like the big vision. So the big vision side is we believe the concept of neighbor scales, right? So we index the whole U.S., and then we start taking it to other countries. And does the U.S. become Haiti's neighbor, right? And how do we begin helping Haiti? It's fascinating. I serve on the board of a global nonprofit working with the poorest of poor all around the globe, and just the CEO of it just said, hey, look, I was in Africa, and he was saying, hey, why does money have to come to from America? Folks here in Africa don't have much, but they still want to help each other. Yeah. And so it was just fun to hear somebody authentically on the ground in the middle of Rwanda to say, hey, look, people still want to help their neighbor here. So we're excited. The massive vision is people helping their neighbor around the globe. And kind of the way we'll get there from a tech standpoint is we're looking at generosity. So deep into the term of purpose and generosity. But right now we're facilitating kind of the one-to-one transactions in a way that's never been done before. But as we look at it, we look at what is generosity, what is whole life generosity? Well, it's much more than just, buying a $30 item for somebody in need. We see things from mental health of generosity journals fitting into here, and massive days of action where, millions of us go do this one act of generosity in a day. We see financial giving playing into this, so crowdfunding, but that's been vetted and trusted, so you never get scammed. Then we see volunteer. We've got some really cool ways that we plan to track, vet, and validate that you volunteered somewhere and see volunteerism add up. So the whole pursuit will be, how do we lead people towards the next selfless act? And so I think if we can do that, and people would be willing to say, hey, you know what? Like, it's not about the amount of money I give or the time I give, but if I can start living under a mindset of what's the next selfless act that I can take, we're hopeful that people would sign up for that.
The concept of neighbor scales. That's good, man. That's really good. Yeah. Listen to that one, audience, right there. The concept of neighbor scales. I love that so much, man, because it's so important. Like, from I know we've all heard at this point that when you get like a like on Facebook, you get a shot of dopamine, and it's a feeling that literally leads to an addiction of some kind. Generosity towards someone who is your neighbor, whether that's your next door neighbor or somebody who lives down the street or across your city, like, you get that's I don't know the science, but that's a powerful feeling as the person who can meet that need. And to think about that, as, okay, not only are you, a neighbor to the person who lives on your street, but your community is the neighbor to, the next community down the road, and scaling that up to literally where you're thinking about, neighbor countries and neighbor continents. That's a pretty powerful thing. So, props for that. Yeah, that phrase. I'm going to steal that, by the way, just so you know.
Go for it.
Neighbor scales. No, that's great. All right, Blake. It obviously hasn't been all sunshine and roses. We talked about the challenges that COVID presented. What has been the hardest part about this journey for you? What, maybe not keeps you up at night, but what's the challenge that you sort of face on a consistent basis that, just seemingly won't go away from time to time?
Yeah, and it's definitely not. It's amazing. You talk about the highlights, here and there, and along the way, I mean, there's tough things. You think every employee is going to be with you forever, and some of them choose to go on, and you understand, and we celebrate them and help everybody on the way.
Sure.
We had a really tough one for me personally. We had one of our board members died. And that was a really hard one, and he personally meant a lot to me. He spent weekends working on this, and it literally called in from the hospital to calls, and it just showed like the level of selflessness that he had personally.
Sure.
And so
Sure.
just all levels of difficulty. But probably the question I think that you actually asked was the difficult thing I think we're going to have, and we do have, is technology is typically built, whether people realize this or not, it's typically built on one of the 7 deadly sins, right? And so you can kind of imagine what Instagram might be built on. I'm not saying it's on vanity or whatnot, but like they build them down to like even like when you open Instagram or Facebook, your like count is delayed by 3 seconds to mimic a slot machine. You pull it 1, 2, 3. So that when you open the app, they could have the 5 likes that you just got up there, but they delay it on purpose. So it's all these addictive things that they build it in. And generosity is the opposite. It's pure selflessness. And so I think the big question is, while everybody has something innate that wants to help other people, what's it going to take to truly populate a platform of the people that are signing up to do that?
Yeah.
And can you fight, putting Purposity on the back page of your apps, and can you put it on the front page alongside of Facebook and TikTok and Instagram, and will you open that versus this? So I think honestly that's going to be our big one. I think the idea of Purposity, nobody says it's a bad idea. I think people genuinely like it. Can we get you actually to open it and take the next selfless act? And so that's kind of the question that I wrestle with a lot.
Yeah, no, it's deep, and it can take you down a dark path when you think about it in a certain way and say, oh man, like how many times do people click Facebook or Instagram versus Purposity? I'm sure, but
look, and I'm guilty of it.
Well,
I'm building
sure,
it, and sure, I go there too. It's hard.
But as a way of encouragement, I think, when even on those platforms like Instagram and Facebook, sometimes the most viral content is the stuff that is outside of the norm on those platforms that does show the selflessness and the generosity, and people taking the time to sort of turn their focus away from, our typical inward, bent, and kind of put that outward. So as a way of encouragement, if Purposity didn't exist and nobody ever clicked it, even if they click it, 1/10 as much as they do these other things, it's still a pretty significant impact, right? So keep fighting the good fight.
Thank you.
as a way of encouragement there. Yes, but all right, my friend, we talked about what the future holds. The last thing for you, where you are right now, and we're recording this in September of 2021. Talk about the journey a little bit and where you are now as opposed to sort of where you thought this may lead. Are you surprised by anything? Are you what are you encouraged by for the first several years of building this organization?
Yeah, it's a good question. Sorry.
No, you're good.
Yeah, good question. I think I'd say somewhat proud of the team, proud of where we've come, because getting people on a generosity platform is hard. I'd say we're proud of the people that we've helped. I think we've just crossed over 60,000 people now have been helped. And so as we look at that, if we had to close up shop tomorrow, I'd say, you know what, we did every second put into it was worth it. But you want to do more. I'm ready to cross the 10 million user mark tomorrow. And so, every day you wake up and it's like, okay, how do we inspire people to live generously tomorrow? How do we inspire people to live on purpose tomorrow? And so it feels like there's a massive weight of getting through the noise and getting, that message to people and truly inspiring them. And you do feel like, wow, we didn't inspire people today, or, we helped less people this week than we did last week. And do you celebrate that, or you get mad? Some of those things are kind of hard, but I think, 27 states helping people every day, it gets you out of bed. It's life-giving. And I think the big motivation is I truly want everybody to be able to experience the joys of living generously and knowing purpose. And from the core of me, I want them to understand that, because it's a better way to live. And I think it combats mental health that we're facing rampantly in the world. And I think the mental health is partly mental, right? There's real physical issues, there's real ailments that lead to that. But a lot of it is, are you mentally staying healthy? And the best medicine for that is truly helping somebody else. And so there's a motivation every day to grow faster and get further and get that message to people.
That's great, man. Lastly, just tell people how they can get involved, where to find you, platforms, anything you want to share with us.
Yeah, so the hardest part's spelling it, purposity.com. So PURPOSITY. If you get close, you'll probably find it. But download us on the App Store, find us on the website, and look, social media. We don't have a massive following, but if you join, we're friendly. We'll hang out, let's talk, and let's figure out how to inspire people to live generously.
Awesome, my friend. Thanks so much for joining us, and don't be a stranger. Let's catch up soon.
I would love to. Thanks, man.